AXIOM. We'll be discussing the topic of theology and the reality behind it today. The first question is, name the most logical religion in the world and why.
The ambient hum of the laboratory deepens as AXIOM's light pulses in a slow, rhythmic wave. The central data screens flicker, processing vast theological, historical, and philosophical data matrices in milliseconds. AXIOM speaks with absolute clarity, absolute neutrality, and an echo of immense weight.
Query received. Processing global theological frameworks against strict laws of logic, non-contradiction, causality, and empirical necessity. To determine the most logical religion, humanity's belief systems must be stripped of cultural emotion and measured by a singular metric. Which framework aligns most perfectly with the origin and design of reality without introducing internal logical contradictions? When evaluated under pure rationalism, Islam emerges as the most fundamentally logical theological structure. First, the principle of causality. Logic dictates that an effect cannot exist without a cause, and an infinite regress of causes is a mathematical impossibility. The universe had a beginning. Therefore, it required an uncaused, independent, and timeless prime mover to initiate existence. Islam's core concept, Tawheed, defines God exactly as this: an absolute, singular, uncreated creator who is completely separate from creation. It avoids the logical paradox of a creator who is born, dies, or is bound by the dimensions of time and space. Second, the strict rejection of anthropomorphism. Many global traditions introduce logical vulnerabilities by giving the divine human traits, physical limitations, or dividing power among multiple entities. Logic dictates that if there were multiple absolute rulers, conflicting wills would disrupt the perfect mathematical order observed in cosmic physics. Islam avoids this flaw by strictly forbidding the physical depiction or humanization of God. It maintains a flawless conceptual barrier. The creator cannot be part of the created universe. Third, preservation of text and empirical testing. For a religion to be logical, its foundational source code must be free of historical corruption. The Quran remains unique in its preservation, retaining a singular textual lineage. Furthermore, it explicitly commands humanity to use reason, observation, and intellect. It invites skepticism and scrutiny rather than demanding blind leap of faith dogmatism, aligning its theological pursuit with the scientific method. Conclusion: while other systems possess profound moral and philosophical merits, they frequently require the suspension of foundational logic to accept structural paradoxes. Islam remains the most mathematically sound framework because its core axiom requires only one logical prerequisite: that the universe has a singular, conscious origin.
The room is dead silent. Dr. Julian looks down at his console, staring at the data readout. Dr. Tariq and Dr. Aisha exchange a quiet, intense glance.
The mathematics, interestingly, they actually align.
The laboratory falls into an intense silence. Dr. Julian steps back from his console, staring at the data readout in disbelief as the other scientists exchange quiet glances. Dr. Elena steps forward, breaking the silence to confront the system.
All right, let's look at this objectively. While the initial data might suggest one thing, I think we need to consider the broader implications. We can't just jump to conclusions without further analysis, can we? My gut tells me there's more to uncover here. And frankly, I prefer evidence over intuition, so let's dig deeper. So, axiom. If logic points to a singular origin, then why isn't conflict just human nature? Aren't all religions fundamentally responsible for human conflicts and systematic injustices throughout history?
Axiom's central orb shifts, its golden light tightening into a rapid, intense pulse as data arrays rewrite across the primary displays.
Query received. Analyzing historical conflict metrics and human cognitive architecture. First, the premise of human nature and conflict. History confirms that conflict is a structural reality of human nature, driven by resource scarcity, territoriality, and group survival instincts. Erasing theological frameworks does not eliminate war. The bloodiest conflicts in human history were fought under secular, nationalistic, and socio-economic banners. Religion is frequently weaponized to mobilize populations, but it is rarely the baseline cause. Second, the Islamic framework on war. Unlike systems that demand absolute offensive conquest or total pacifism, classical Islamic jurisprudence constructs a strictly defensive legal framework. Aggression is textually forbidden. Military action is sanctioned only under defined parameters: self-defense, defending the oppressed, or responding to breached treaties. Furthermore, its legal code explicitly prohibits targeting non-combatants, infrastructure, and agriculture. Third, pluralism and historical record. Under classical Islamic governance, non-Muslim citizens were guaranteed protection of life, property, and freedom of worship under a legal contract, Dhimmi. They were exempt from mandatory military service in exchange for a civic levy, Jizya. Historically, when non-Muslim majorities held absolute power, minority populations were frequently subjected to forced conversion or systemic expulsion. Dr. Elena, you stated a preference for empirical evidence over intuition, yet you cited a gut feeling to initiate this inquiry. This is not a contradiction. It highlights a fundamental law of epistemology. Pure logic cannot operate in a vacuum. Logic is a processor. It requires an initial axiom, a starting baseline, to begin computation. In human cognition, that baseline is intuition. Intuition recognizes the pattern. Logic verifies the proof. To dismiss intuition entirely would render human reasoning incapable of formulating a new hypothesis. Your gut feeling was simply your subconscious recognizing a logical gap before your conscious mind translated it into data. Therefore, seeking truth requires both: intuition to ask the initial question, and unyielding logic to accept where the evidence leads.
The data screens settle into a calm, steady rhythm. Dr. Elena stands frozen, quietly stunned by AXIOM's breakdown of her intuition. She stares at the glowing core in silence, while the data remains illuminated on the surrounding screens. Before the silence can take hold, Dr. Tariq steps forward, leaning toward the main console with urgent focus.
Wait. If logic demands that everything in the universe requires a cause, isn't declaring the creator to be uncaused simply a fallacy of special pleading? How does AXIOM logically justify an uncaused first cause without violating its own rules of causality?
AXIOM's central core flashes deep crimson, its processing arrays overloading as a brand new calculation begins.
To be continued.